So last Friday, I had a little time to kill before picking up my kids from school, and it was a gorgeous day out, so I decided to spend some time cruising the back roads in my hometown. I passed this guy with his thumb out trying to catch a ride, and I almost picked this guy up. He looked to be about late 30s, early 40s, carrying a fishing pole and a backpack. Pretty innocent looking, I guess. However, I'm a lone female and have been taught with hundreds of hitchhiker gone wrong stories that you just keep driving. So I kept driving, and as I'm driving, I am having this internal dialogue of guilt about my decision not to pick this guy up. You know, if I was hitchhiking, I'd hope someone would pick me up, and I mean, really, what's the worst that could happen? That, mixed with my new self-improvement goal of doing the things that scare me the most, and as often as possible, led me to the conclusion that if when I looped back around and he was still walking, I would pick him up. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, he was still there. I was feeling a little nervous pulling over getting him, but what was I going to do? Pull out while he was trying to get in my vehicle? As soon as he gets in, I realize I've probably made a horrible mistake. One, because he seemed like he was tweaking bulls and he smelled god-awful. Two, because this dude was looking at me like I was a feast and he was starved. I did not realize exactly how rattled I was with my decision until he asked me for a smoke, and my hands were shaking so bad I barely pulled one out of my pack without breaking it. Driving made it easier to hide my nerves, but I was internally freaking out and trying to decide how I would beat this guy's ass if he tried anything. He introduced himself as Wayne, and he lives about 5 minutes from where I picked him up. Meanwhile, he's telling me how he lost his license due to DUIs, and how he was living in this house with an old man. He tried to get him to come with him before, but he didn't want to come, etc. He's also trying to talk me into hanging out at said house with him, and come over and drink with him the next day. When I finally get him to his destination, it's a little shack-like thing surrounded by all these junk cars and shit. He gets out and is still trying to get me to come inside with him. I tell him no and leave. I'm feeling really relieved and a little proud that I faced a fear of mine at this point. Fast forward to Monday, my instructor says, "Holy shit, apparently someone got murdered down the so-and-such road. Do you know anyone down that way?" I say, "Wow, that's really ironic. I took a hitchhiker down that road Friday. I think his name was Wayne." Probably wasn't even 15 minutes later when I see old Wayne's picture on Facebook, saying the FBI had picked him up for stabbing someone to death at that very house I dropped him off at Friday. Graphic information of how he stabbed him in the lungs and the victim bled out in that little shack. And the old man he was living with doesn't even exist. I swear, I'll never pick up another hitchhiker again in my life. Me and my mother were driving through our small town in southwest Virginia. At some point, we came across a woman walking down the road. Mind you, it's very hot outside, it's the summertime, and I noticed she was carrying a child swaddled up in a blanket, which struck me as a poor choice considering it was the middle of summer. It just seemed too warm for a swaddle. So I said to Mom, "We really need to pick that woman up. Surely she isn't far from where she needs to go, but she has a baby." And to my surprise, my mom pulls into the gas station parking lot, tells me to go inside and get a large bottle of water, and we will ask her if she needs a ride on our way out. So as we approach this woman, I notice that she's very thin, almost sickly looking. Not saying anything at all, not even a thank you, which really didn't sit right with me, because this is the South. Everyone is friendly and approachable for the most part. So we ask her where she's needing to go. And me, being in the passenger seat, I turn around and look at her while she's looking down at her baby, cooing at it. She replies without ever looking up from it. About 2 miles past the Dollar General on Jeb Stewart. We were very close to that area. I decided to turn and speak to the woman and maybe get a conversation going, but as I got a better look at her and her baby, it was actually a drywall hammer wrapped up in a blanket inside another blanket. I froze. It was like I walked into a deep freezer. I told my mom that I really thought we should stop because I heard what sounded like knocking from the engine and was very adamant that we needed to stop at the upcoming Dollar General. As we pull in, I told my mom to get out of the car so she could help me locate where the noise was coming from. As we met at the hood of the car, that's where I said, "Mom, that's not a baby. She has a hammer in that blanket." To which my mother advised me that we should walk inside to see if they have anything to fix that, and told the woman we would be right back. We walked inside and told them to call the police so that they could help this woman. As we walked outside, we told the woman in our car that we could no longer have her in our vehicle and explained why. My mom gave her some vague reason as to why we couldn't take her any further. She got out of the vehicle very angrily but almost confused, and we left her in the parking lot. She very well could have just been a really confused woman with some mental issues. I don't know. I do know that I don't think she had good intentions for us. This happened a year ago, but the memory is still very clear. After attending a wedding dinner, my friend drove me home. It was late at night. We saw an old lady walking by the side of the road. She was walking alone, holding an umbrella. Being as kind as he always is, my friend stopped and asked the old lady if she needed a ride. The old lady said she was heading to the bridge just a few miles ahead. My friend asked her to hop into the back seat of the car, and we continued to drive. A few minutes later, the weight of the car suddenly lifted. He was driving an old sedan, so if someone gets in the car, it weighed down. If someone got off, it lifted. I looked behind and the lady had vanished, out of thin air. Mind you, the car was still moving while this happened. However, the lady's umbrella was still in the back seat. I looked at my friend and he too knew what happened, but we didn't dare say a word. I just told him the umbrella was still there. Once we reached the bridge, I put the umbrella on the floor and we continued to drive home. This is a story my dad told me not too long ago about my grandpa and how he came extremely close to being murdered. My grandpa used to be a pastor at a local church, and one night he was driving home from a service and was still wearing his robes and collar. He saw a hitchhiker at the side of the road and decided to pull over and pick him up like he usually would when he saw a hitchhiker. He pulled over and the man got in. The man was wearing overalls and was also carrying an old metal lunchbox with him. My grandpa assumed that he was a construction worker who did not have a ride home after a shift. My grandpa and him started to converse and eventually arrived at the man's destination. The man got out and thanked my grandpa for the ride. A few days later, my grandpa was talking to his neighbor. At one point in the conversation, she brought up a story that she had seen on the news about a man who would get rides from people by hitchhiking. Then, when he would reach his destination, he would take a knife out of an old metal lunchbox and kill the person driving. My grandpa almost fainted after hearing this news. He assumed the only reason he was alive and talking to her was because of the robes and collar he was wearing that night.